In Nalchik at the Kabardino-Balkarian State University, the second International Scientific and Practical Conference Russia and Turkey in Global Geopolitical Processes 2025 was held. The organizers were the International Circassian Association and the Gorchakov Public Diplomacy Support Fund. Gorchakov. The Gorchakov Fund was established by the Russian Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and its official mission, as stated online, is to promote public diplomacy and to foster a favorable public, political, and business climate for Russia abroad. According to media reports, the main goal of the forum was to strengthen bilateral ties, expand cooperation, and exchange views on current issues in Russian-Turkish relations. Participants included both Russian Circassians and representatives of the diaspora from abroad. The event was opened by officials from Kabardino-Balkaria, as well as the university rector Yuri Altudov and the writer from Kakmashbash. The president of Chasa Krokov also delivered a welcoming address. He noted that Russia and Turkey are connected not only by trade and economic relations, but also by approximately 5 to 7 million compatriots, with whom it is necessary to maintain contact so that they do not forget their language and culture. According to him, the Turkish authorities do not hinder this. On the contrary, they encourage such initiatives. Sakrokov emphasized the need to enlighten and inform the diaspora, influencing the minds and hearts of compatriots and instilling the strategy of the historical homeland. Apparently, this strategy was outlined in the speech by Kakmashbash, who cited as an example his grandson who is participating in Russia's war in Ukraine. And he concluded his speech with the words, quote, "We are with the Russian people for centuries, we need no other, and the Adygs fully support the policy of the President of Russia." End of quote. It remains a mystery what kind of sociology these conclusions are based on, and who authorized him to speak on behalf of the entire Adyg people. In circumstances where there are no elections, no political competition, and not even the possibility to discuss ideas, such statements sound more like a literary genre than a reflection of reality. I would also like to note that the Turkish Caucasian Federation gave a detailed report on its participation, emphasizing the importance of the conference. This organization is actively involved in the domestic political processes currently taking place in Turkey, including preparations for constitutional changes. Their role in discussing Circassian issues requires separate analysis, and we will talk about this later. It is also worth noting the participation in the conference of Konstantin Zatulin, first deputy chairman of the State Duma Committee on CIS Affairs, Eurasian Integration and Relations with Compatriots. He announced a number of legislative initiatives which, according to media reports, are expected to attract particular interest in the Adygi community. In particular, the discussion focused on planned amendments to the law on compatriots, which proposed to legally establish a list of peoples who have historically lived in Russia. Zatulin emphasized, and I quote, "The Adygi have no other homeland but Russia. The ancestors of the Circassians, who are now scattered all over the world, lived here, so they have the right to return to their historical homeland through a simplified procedure. It's remarkable to observe how the rhetoric has changed after a quarter of a century. Those who were recently accused of extremism and terrorism for demanding a simplified procedure for the return of compatriots now see that the very same ideas are being voiced by their former opponents. Moreover, it is these very people who are now trying to lead the process, presenting it as their own achievement." Ahead of the speech at the Working Group on Indigenous Peoples, scheduled for July 27th, another meeting between Tuvaj Kazanokov and the Russian side took place on the sidelines of the United Nations. This time, the delegation was headed by Russian diplomat Teimuraz Ramishvili. The main topic of discussion was the right of the Circassians to return to their historical homeland. The key message was not to apply to the descendants of the exiled the laws intended for foreign citizens or stateless persons, but to regard them as representatives of the indigenous people on the territory of modern Russia. No progress was achieved at this meeting. Here it is important to recall a telling example. In the late 1990s, a law on repatriation was adopted in the Republic of Adygea. This became a concrete step towards solving the Circassian issue and allowed the Circassians from Kosovo who settled in Ulima Fakabal to return to their homeland. But this law did not last long. The authorities saw it more as an initiative that needed to be brought under their control. And when, in the early 2000s, the political field was finally cleared, the law was declared void. The irony is that decades later, the very same forces that once blocked the initiative of the Circassian socio-political movement are now once again talking about lawful repatriation. And now this process is being presented as a step towards the people, but most importantly as a managed tool that is under the complete control of the federal center. A telling mistake, in my opinion, is the attempt to ignore issues that concern a significant part of society. First and foremost, this relates to proficiency in the Russian language. In his speech, Zatulin reiterated the point that the only requirement for Circassians living abroad would be the obligation to know the Russian language. His grievances as a Russian person born in Sochi are understandable, but they understandably provoke indignation among public activists and human rights defenders from among the indigenous population. If we look at actual practice, we can see that mass repatriation programs for compatriots exist in Germany, Greece, and Israel, and they are based on a different principle. The main requirement is proof of ethnic origin, and language becomes a tool for integration, not an obstacle. The state creates conditions for return and adaptation, and it is within these programs that a person learns the language. For example, it is hard to imagine that, in the midst of a humanitarian catastrophe in Syria, anyone could learn a foreign language without being certain of their right to return. In addition to formal requirements, there is also a de facto filter at the level of security services, which determines whether the applicant meets the criteria or not. Nevertheless, experience shows that those who return to their homeland often learn Russian faster than their native language, since Russian is needed for everyday life and earning a living, an objective practical necessity. Therefore, this approach appears to be a deliberate creation of barriers to the return of compatriots. However, it is not specified whether time was devoted to these issues at the conference. The main topics of the meeting were the key areas of cooperation between Russia and Turkey, cultural exchange in the humanities, economic interaction, and other fields. Nevertheless, it is important to note that Circassian groups, supported by the governments of Russia and Turkey, have begun to demonstrate their political vision for the further development of events. One cannot ignore one of the most high-profile corruption cases of recent years. The case of Aslan Trakov, former chairman of the Supreme Court of Adygea and at the same time head of the Department of Criminal Law at Adygea State University. By decision of the Vovsk City Court, following a lawsuit by the Prosecutor General's office, property worth over 13 billion rubles was confiscated from Trakov. A total of 214 real estate properties were seized, along with more than 100 land plots, dozens of commercial buildings and residential houses, as well as shares in companies valued at billions of rubles. The investigation established that the assets were of corrupt origin and were obtained through abuse of official position. It is important to note that Aslan Trakov himself and his son fully admitted their guilt, and the court granted the Prosecutor General's office's claim in full. All the property has been transferred to state ownership. Aslan Trakov headed the Supreme Court of Adygea from 1998 to 2019, and according to the university's website, he continues to work as the head of the Department of Criminal Law at the university. It should be noted that many commentators are speaking out in defense of the former judge, pointing to the enormous scale of corruption in the country, which exists in even greater volumes, and linking such decisions to an attack on regional elites. There is certainly logic in this, and without a doubt, the scale of corruption in the country is off the charts and has long become a routine matter for Russians. However, it is striking when these very same people become fierce accusers in less high-profile cases. As you already know from the publication on the channel, a criminal case has been opened against our host, Larisa Tupcokova, and the notification about it was sent to her parents at her registered address. If you look at the chain of events, the picture is quite telling. First, a segment aired on Republican television where Larisa and I were mentioned in the usual propagandist style, attaching labels that mislead viewers. Then, a fake website appeared, supposedly representing a Circassian center in Dabelis, which was declared an extremist organization in the summer of 2024. Moreover, strictly according to the law, it was a non-existent non-profit organization that was declared extremist. But that's a separate topic which I discussed in one of the episodes. On the website, we were listed as active research staff and materials were published under our names. But as soon as we exposed the forgery, the site disappeared. The information that has been preserved clearly shows that the website was most likely originally conceived as an evidence base. It's hard to imagine any other explanation for its appearance and mysterious disappearance. Even in a Russian court 5 years ago, such evidence would have easily caused the case to fall apart. And just how much freedom law enforcement agencies have today will apparently become clear in the near future. To talk about the process and the emerging information, today I have invited as guests Larisa Tupcokova, Larisa Kaibliag, and Makua Tamkovit. So, Larisa, to start, Could you please tell us in detail how you first truly found out that a serious criminal case had been officially opened against you, and what exactly you know at this particular point in time? Perhaps there are some significant new details or additional pieces of information beyond what was originally written in your comprehensive article.
Well, the notification that a criminal case had been opened against me was sent to my registered address where my parents currently live. The criminal case was initiated by the investigative committee of Adygea, signed by Oshinov, the investigator, Melyokovsky, investigator Oshinov. According to the notification, the criminal case was initiated under Part 2 of Article 282, which involves participation in an extremist organization. At this stage, it has not been possible to find any additional information about the case. And as the lawyers explained to me, even having an attorney does not make this possible. In other words, it is impossible to obtain any further details or additional information. In any case, I am grateful to the lawyers who responded and provided a consultation. And after my post, I received hundreds of comments, hundreds of supportive reactions, for which I am very grateful to everyone.
So does that mean at this stage it's not possible to take any action at all?
Yes, as the lawyers explained to me, there are practically no mechanisms for protection against this article. There are also two significant factors here. First, hiring a lawyer or attorney to defend you locally is a big responsibility that carries significant risks for those who remain neutral. Many of them have families, and I understand how difficult this would be for them. Second, it involves financial costs for lawyers and attorneys, which I cannot afford at the moment. And considering that, as the lawyers explained to me, hiring attorneys right now doesn't make sense, I decided to wait and see how things develop.
So, at this very moment in time, there is basically absolutely no concrete information at all available, but as many astute commentators and observers rightly and quite accurately point out, you probably have some strong assumptions about precisely what this particular prosecution is truly connected to, or rather, not even necessarily what it's directly connected to. But what exactly do you personally think are the formal and legitimate reasons for subjecting you to this criminal prosecution?
Well, first of all, this didn't come as a surprise to me because there had already been provocations in the form of TV reports about a fake website, which was written about supposedly claiming that we write for and are research associates of the Circassian Cultural Center, which has been declared an extremist organization in Russia, although in fact, legally, that's not the case at all. A completely different organization was declared extremist. Nevertheless, I haven't worked at the center for a long time, and right now I don't understand why criminal cases have been initiated against me at this particular moment. All my activities are related to teaching the Circassian language and developing various projects connected to the language. I have not been, nor am I currently, a member of any other organizations, so only one possible explanation keeps running through my mind. Well, and considering that I sometimes do the weather forecast on Turkic media, maybe that's why I'm considered an extremist. Actually, after the report on local television, I wanted to appeal to the Union of Journalists to defend my name, to refute the accusations that were made in the report, but then I decided it didn't make sense, since I personally know many people and many know what I do and how I live. I want to thank the media who paid attention to my publication and covered the events, covered the process. Thank you all very much. I also want to thank everyone who did not remain indifferent.
There really have been a lot of reactions, many comments, and words of support directed at you these days. And many people are worried and are asking what risks you are facing, whether there is anything to be afraid of, whether there is a threat to your safety. Your current whereabouts have been revealed.
Indeed, the main question I'm being asked now is whether Russia can currently request my extradition from Georgia. I want to remind everyone that I have been living in Georgia for several years, more than 14 years, and I am a citizen of Georgia. And as far as I know, as far as I'm aware, extraditing one's own citizens to another country is simply not practiced. So for now, I remain calm.
In any case, we will, of course, diligently report on any and all new significant details, developments, or pertinent information that may emerge or become known to us concerning this particular case, ensuring our audience is fully informed as soon as such information is verified and available. We will continue to monitor this issue, and we will continue our work. And so, Here's another important question that I truly want to ask you within the broader context of the current news agenda, which is directly and significantly related to your specific field of activity, and your what's. In recent days, there has been a lot of discussion about the appearance of the Circassian language in Yandex Translate, more precisely the Eastern dialect of the Circassian language, or to be even more exact, as it is officially called, the Kabardian-Circassian language in Yandex. There is also talk that the Western dialect is being prepared for release as well. You've covered this process many times, and we've talked and asked one of the active participants in this work, Anzorok from our community, to comment as well. How incredibly important do you truly think this crucial step is for the continued preservation and widespread popularization of the Circassian language? And in a broader sense, how genuinely practical and effective do you believe this innovative tool can ultimately be for seamless communication among all Circassians living scattered around the entire world?
As a teacher of the Circassian language, of course, I am glad and welcome all steps taken towards the development and preservation of our native language. The fact that the Circassian language has appeared in Yandex Translator makes me happy, and I hope that it will become widespread and that its implementation will be useful to everyone who wants to learn their native language. And I am convinced that it will be useful to everyone. Of course, everything that is currently being done, especially within the technical field, is incredibly important and holds significant value now, particularly since the language itself has gradually and progressively also moved into the broader technical sphere. But here, I would also like to specifically point out that in the Yandex Translator application, the language is clearly listed as the Kabardian-Circassian language, which is quite interesting. This is understandable because currently in Russia, the Circassian language is represented by 2 official languages, even though it is actually one language. I think it would be more accurate to indicate it as the Eastern Circassian dialect of the Circassian language, and when the Western one appears, to also call it the Western dialect of the Circassian language. But unfortunately, this highlights the problems of unity, of bringing the language together, of unifying the language which our people are currently facing.
But to what extent can we even talk about unifying the language? After all, many people openly and publicly discuss this very topic, and there are even some rather passionate hotheads who, speaking both distinct dialects in Adygea, try to meticulously explain that these are actually entirely different languages altogether. We absolutely shouldn't pay any attention whatsoever to such utter nonsense, so we just let it completely go in one ear and immediately out the other. But still, to what significant extent can we truly and genuinely talk about unifying the language? That is to say, how exactly can we, for example, effectively unite the Eastern and Western dialects, especially considering that there really are quite significant and noticeable differences between them? In general, is this even possible, or what steps are we talking about when we speak of unification?
Well, the discussion of this issue didn't start just now, and it probably won't end now either. It will continue on. I also frequently think about this significant question as a dedicated philologist, and perhaps I deeply understand that merging 2 distinct languages, 2 languages that inherently sound quite different, into one unified entity will ultimately not work in the end. If we were to do that, one valuable language would inevitably be lost. We would absolutely have to make a definitive choice, either the Eastern one or the Western one. If we want to preserve both variants, we can find a solution specifically in the alphabet. This is my subjective opinion. I am also reflecting on this question and have spoken about it before as well. For example, the unified alphabet, we are talking about a unified alphabet, about creating a single alphabet. If we take the alphabet, these are symbols, letters. If one person looks at a letter, at a symbol, they see their own meaning in it. For example, a speaker of the Western dialect sees their own letter, their own sound. In other words, they identify it as, for instance, the she or ji sounds. A speaker of the Eastern dialect, looking at the exact same letter, sees their own sound in it. Perhaps in this we can find a solution. At the very least, this would be a big step toward unification and a possible attempt at resolving this issue.
Well, thank you for sharing your thoughts on this topic once again. Larisa Tupcokova was near Plieramcha. Thank you for the information.
Thank you to Idomor for inviting me today. Thank you to all the viewers, to everyone who cares about me. Today, it was important for me to speak out. It was important to get my message across to everyone. I'm in good spirits, and it was important for me that everyone who cares about me could see that. Idomor will now continue the broadcast, and I'm not saying goodbye to you yet. See you at the end with your favorite weather forecast for Rotina.
The leadership of Adygea has decided to prepare a reissue of the book by Nurzhan Emukova titled The Historical Toponymy of Western Circassia. The first edition was published in 2021 with only 500 copies and immediately became a bibliographic rarity. The book is based on archival materials and serves as a unique source of information about Circassian names of rivers, mountains, valleys and lakes, as well as auls and settlements of Adygea. The demand for the publication was so high that it almost immediately disappeared from bookstore shelves. The new print run is not only a response to readers' interest, but also part of a larger project by Nurzhan Emukova to study the historical Circassian toponymy of Western Circassia. The importance of such research is hard to overestimate. It preserves the memory of the people and their connection to the land. And Adygea is only a part of the vast field for further work. And we hope that the research will continue. And we wish the author success in this important endeavor. At the end of this episode, you'll find the promised weather forecast for the homeland, but we will continue our work. We do not intend to remain silent and will speak the truth. Assalamu alaikum.
The weather in the motherland forecast for Sochi is +21, in Tuapse +20, in Jubga +19, in the Russian Ernest. It's 18 degrees Celsius in Terek. +18 also in Anapa. In Krasnodar it's +17. It's 18 degrees Celsius in Adygea, +17 in Maykop and Saibe. In Armavir it's +16. In Cherkassk it's +14. +14 also in Kislovodsk. In Pyatigorsk it's +13. In Nalchik it's +12. In Terek it's +16. In Nartkala up to +15. In Mozdok it's +16. Temperature in the mountains. On Fisht it's +17. On Elbrus it's +14. In Dombey it's +17. The temperature of the Black Sea is +15.
Soft, calm music,